Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of my favourite people and some of the world's biggest stars. And we've got one for you today. Unchained Melodies, a brand new album with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, has just been released. And I'm delighted to say, to talk about it, is Roy Orbison Junior. How are you?
I'm great. Hello.
Do you know, we've spoken before, and I say this every time, but what a thrill it must be to be you. To have your dad's voice living on in this context is so stunning. The orchestrations are remarkable. The size of this orchestra is incredible.
Oh, yes, it is. I'm blessed every day, yes. It doesn't get any better. It's a project we've been working on a long time. My mother, Barbara Orbison, first started this 20 years ago, and she talked to many different, the Vienna choir and orchestra, and then it came around to the UK, and we always knew that we wanted to do it in London, in the UK. But Don Reedman and Nick Patrick are the brains behind all these RPO albums, and they do such a good job. We heard the Elvis ones. We were a little jealous, and I've been telling people, they said, well, was it hard to say yes? Did you have to think about it? And I said, oh, no, we said yes before the project ever started. And so the last one was so successful, A Love So Beautiful, that now this new one is called Unchained Melodies.
And it's stunning. I just listened to it the other day, and it's quite remarkable how big this orchestra sounds, but how big your father's voice sounds. I wonder how they do it, because back in the day, they hadn't necessarily got the technology where they can isolate a microphone like they could today. I mean, even this interview, we're using technology to make a 200-mile distance sound as if we're sat in the same room. How do they make that voice sound so perfect and isolated?
Well, it does take a lot of work, and it's kind of the boring part of the story. It is many, many hours, and, there's a lot of archiving and detective work that goes into, tracking down the master tapes and then finding out. It comes from so many different decades. Some are multi-tracks, some are mono, and, but we used every trick in the book and every technology, and the technology keeps getting better every album. And so I'm holding a physical copy right now, and it just gets me so excited to look at it. Unchained Melodies, Roy Orbison with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And, they take from different areas. We've used alternate takes. We've used composite takes, using a line from different, and then in some cases we only have the original. So we have just the one take that we have to work with. So it's everything. It's all of the above.
Yeah, I don't think it's boring at all, that part, because getting those tapes and making them sound as good as they do is quite remarkable. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who is now in his 80s, and he was a cleaner at a local club here called the Commodore in Nottingham. Mm-hmm. And he said Roy Orbison came and performed. And it's extraordinary for a guy who listens to these records with such reverence to think that just down the road he came. I mean, he was a jobbing star that had to work. I mean, incredible legacy of shows across the world, really.
Oh, yes. When I look at a map of Britain, I drove with him down nearly every road in the whole country. I mean, we passed through from one place to the next. We went everywhere. So I think I've been in nearly every city and village in your country.
Is it torturous to be on the road? I wonder what it's like after the first time. The first time's exciting, and then you got to do the same road again. How did you keep it fresh and not go insane? Because touring's tough.
It actually kills a lot of people, but I was born into it, so I still I weather it much better than most. I can do it, and my dad took the whole family, So nowadays when people say, "Oh, I have a family," I have little Roy the Third and Bo, my children, and my wife Osa, and they're here with me today, and we travel around. So Roy it was almost the only life he knew. For him, that was his. He felt loved by the audience. That's where he felt at home. But it's a cliche, but he felt at home on stage, and so he definitely loved the UK.
Was it a sort of glamorous existence, or was it one of sort of get in the back of the charavan and get to the next town?
Well, Roy was a humble man, so he wasn't really doing it necessarily for the money, but okay, I'll put it in context for you. He was the first American really to come to England. He was the first star. Chuck Berry had been here on a little package tour, but Roy was the first big international superstar to come to this country at all. And yes, I grew up in the Maharishi Suite at the Mayfair. the one that John Bonham notoriously smashed. I had a little a little statue of a lion that I used to play on, and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin smashed it. So, yeah, it would be Led Zeppelin in one room and then us in the next. And it was always like that. Roy was really blessed right from the beginning, But at the same time, yeah, when he would hang out with Buddy Holly, they weren't hanging out in the Maharishi Suite. They were on a street corner in Wink, Texas. So, but he was with Buddy Holly. So from the beginning to the end, Roy was a superstar. He played little festivals though. We'd be in America, and he and Chuck Berry would be playing a little county fair in Wichita. So that's what I meant by the humble part. He stayed in plenty of Holiday Inns.
Roy, I've asked so many wonderful questions so far. Can I ask you a stupid question?
There are no stupid questions, as your teacher told you.
Here's this question that I've wondered for a while. At what point did you realise your dad was Roy Orbison? I know it sounds a silly question, but there must have been a moment when you go, oh, right, everybody doesn't have a dad like mine.
Well, the funny thing was, for the first couple of years, I remember distinctly, I thought everyone did have a dad like mine. The only people that we really hung out with was our next-door neighbor, Johnny Cash. And every time Roy got a Ferrari, Johnny got a Ferrari. Every time Roy got a guard, we got a guard. And so, and they lived so much like we did. I just thought the whole world was nice to each other like this. I thought if your dad was a painter, that all the other painters came to see him, and they all loved it. So it took a little while. The first time I remember feeling scared. People say, like, were you ever panicked? I was separated. We were leaving, and the limousine. They put me in the limousine first because the guards had to go back and forth, kind of taking us in groups. And I was a little kid, maybe 4 years old, and they put me in the back of the limousine, and then they went back to get Mom and Dad, and I was alone. And the fans started smashing at the windows and putting papers against the window and kissing the window and trying to trick me into unlocking the door. They're going like, roll down the window, roll down the window. And I started getting this, I could tell they were trying to trick me. But I still get the same thrill, it happens nearly every day. Here in England, I get in with a cab driver and we're driving along, and then they find out, and suddenly the cab drive is the free. They're like, no, they don't even want money. And they get out and they open the door and they shake my hand, and they love. And it's amazing they remember 60 years later, and there's still so much love here. I can see why Roy liked to be in England.
Yeah, not at all. We have great adoration and admiration too. I wonder about this music and when we can get to see it live. I saw the Elvis one with the Royal Philharmonic in Birmingham, and it was so stunning. Are they going to take this album on the road?
Well, we had the big successful hologram tour, and that tour is again in the next summer of 2019 around Great Britain. Roy Orbison as a hologram, and we'll probably add some of this music in there to freshen it up. But I'm holding a physical copy right now of Unchained Melodies, and I'm just so excited by that. It's called Unchained Melodies, and the song number 1 is Unchained Melody. And that album comes out physically, which is CDs and vinyl. It comes out I keep on saying April. It's November 23rd, 2018, this year. But it's available digitally this weekend, streaming and download, November 16th, 2018. So you can hear it this weekend, and it's available for pre-order right now. I pre-ordered it, so I think I get mine. I think you get it midnight on Friday.
And of course, Unchained Melodies is the title of the album. I got to meet Bill Medley in Las Vegas earlier on in the year. And again, when you meet these people and you think of the stories they've got, so incredible. And when you take on a song like that, it's easily done badly in karaoke, but he made it himself, didn't he? He made it his own. That's not easy to do.
No, when you're dealing with such an iconic, great song, one of the great songs of all time, and you do a cover of it, you're setting yourself up. But in this case, Roy, in a couple of these type songs, he does it well enough. You can hear me hesitate to say, I don't want to actually say it's better than the original, but there's some songs like Unchained Melodies, and Danny Boy is another one on this. When you do Danny Boy, I mean, that's everybody. Ethel Merman did Danny Boy. Everyone did a Danny Boy, but Roy's Danny Boy when you hear it, it's the definitive version. So Roy he has a lot of greats. He's the greatest. He has the greatest rock and roll song of all time with Pretty Woman, the greatest ballad of all time with Crying. He's the greatest singer of all time. The greatest drum riff comes from Pretty Woman. That's the most sampled drum riff in all this techno and rap music. That snare sound isolated. You know what the greatest harmonica riff of all time is? Candyman. Charlie McCoy, Candyman. It's the first thing anyone learns to play. And so, he kind of made it kind of a habit to be the best.
What I love about him too is on Danny Boy, when he goes for that top note, with anybody else you go, are they going to make it? But with your dad, he had that register where he could just get up there with such effortless ease. It was incredible, the range, wasn't it?
It was a spiritual thing, actually. Of course, he had a lot of experience, but he had to go there mentally. You had to have that confidence, and that was all like Buddhism. That was a mental place that he could go, and he made those dreams true. But even for him, it wasn't just effortless.
Is there a club amongst the sons of legends? I spoke to Frank Sinatra Jr. when they came to the Palladium, and I thought that it's a very unique club of people who have had an extraordinary life via their father. Do you know the sons and daughters of people in the same league as your dad?
Yes. Actually, it's a small world, and we run into each other all the time. Yes, that happens all the time. Some of my favorites, of course, Danny Harrison, and the last time I was in New York, I was just paying my bill at a bar, and I heard someone walking behind me, and I heard it was Danny. I turned around and said, "Danny," he said, "Oh, Roy," he said, "I'm in the other room with Julian Lennon. Come on in." And we went in there, and we had just a random night. So there are random nights like that. But I've been really fortunate to meet most of my heroes, and most of their children. I do like to brag a little bit, so I let people know. I know Dizzy Gillespie, I know Johnny Cash, I know John Lennon, I know Elvis Presley, I knew Jim. I knew the Ramones and the Clash and everybody all the way through, and really lucky.
In our remaining moments, those moments you've sat in a dressing room when somebody walks in, normally it's very ordinary, but when somebody like Elvis or that sort of standard of star walks through the door, give me some stories about when you were just sat there, the door opened and it was them.
I never knew who these people were. Some of my favorite stories there, when I was very, very young, about 3 years old, we were on a picnic, and we were with these people, and his daughter was beautiful, and it was my first little kiss, and her name was Mary, and 10 years later, I'm listening to the Beatles, and I look at the album, and I say, Mommy, there's the guy from the picnic, Paul McCartney. And as I was just saying, the Ramones, that one just jumps out all the time. I didn't know who these people were, but John Belushi walks in New York, and he's bringing the Ramones, and he was pestering my dad, trying to get money from him for the Ramones, who he was kind of managing at the time, and and then later on, that's a big piece of history. I'm like, one of the iconic comedians, and he did this sketch on Roy that became, with Dan Aykroyd, who's a good friend of mine, became the Blues Brothers. So, John Belushi wearing the Orbison glasses becomes the Blues Brothers. And I've got stories like that all day. But back to Unchained Melodies. I played on this. My whole family played on it. I played on Unchained Melody, Blue by You, the U2 song, She's a Mystery to Me, Heartbreak Radio. My brother Alex played drums. The whole family's on here. We make it a family affair. So all of Roy's grandchildren are there. And my brother Alex, who wishes he was here, Wesley and Alex were here last time, but they couldn't make it. Wesley is on tour with the Roy Orbison Hologram, and it's in South Carolina tonight. He'll be in Orlando, Florida next week, and so we have that great tour that continues on in the springtime, in the summer.
Can I just ask you about that briefly? I mean, I saw Celine Dion do it at the Coliseum in Las Vegas, and she actually introduced herself. We didn't even know it was the hologram, saying that the hologram's going to be on next, and she walked down the aisle to herself. It was extraordinary. It's so real. Does it kind of freak you out a bit? Because it is like looking at a real person, isn't it, and bringing them back to life?
Well, it didn't freak me out, but it does freak out some of the fans. They go like, I find it a bit creepy. But the thing is, it's something in between going to a movie and seeing a concert. And if you go to a lot of shows like I do, it's fun for something different. So it's fun for people even who aren't Orbison fans. Of course, if you like the music and those songs and Roy's voice, then it becomes something really different. But
I've got to catch it. I can't wait. Thank you so much for your time. It's been so lovely talking to you again. Roy Orbison Jr., of course, features on this brand new album, Unchained Melodies, with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. You'll never hear a better, rounder sound. It is so beautiful. This album is incredible, as are you, and as was your father. Thank you so much for your time, Roy.
Thank you, Alex.